It's 1692, Salem, Massachusetts. 3 women stand in court, their life depending on the words of their family and neighbors. As they stand in front of accusers, they are unknowingly precipitating a series of hysterical allegations and fear that had been slowly brewing for the past century. What started with a handful of women in a small town would lead to a haunting legacy. Not only would it change the way Americans were legally represented, but it would also leave a lasting psychological scar on the American psyche.
Sixteenth and 17th century European history consisted of hundreds of different witchcraft trials across Europe and 30,000 to 60,000 executions. While men and women were both accused, women were consistently targeted as they were seen as more susceptible to the devil's seduction. In 1611, the Puritan King James of Scotland translates and publishes an updated version of the Christian Bible. Within this latest version of the Bible, witches were accused to be the sons and daughters of Satan and were blamed for various unexplainable or unfortunate events at that time. Puritans had an extremely strict adherence to their religion. They prioritized the rules, guidelines, and beliefs of the Bible. Children were not allowed to read any other books than the Bible, and playing or bantering was looked down upon. Women stayed home all day, cleaning and cooking, for societal expectations. When King James introduced the concept of witches, rumors and misconceptions unfurled. England established a penalty for witchcraft in 1641. Men like Thomas Addy, Richard Bernard, and Cotton Mather published guides on witchcraft prosecutions. To add to the tension, diseases such as scurvy, tuberculosis, pneumonia, and smallpox ravaged out the new population of English settlers in the U.S. As Puritans settled in Massachusetts, hostility grew stronger between them and the natives, resulting in wars. The unease followed them into their own colony as strife between Salem Town and Salem Village, 2 larger sects of Salem, intensified. Salem Town was home to the richer citizens of Salem, whilst the village was rural farmland that provided all the crops. In 1672, Salem Village officially broke off from the town and gained their independence. While the town had access to their own local church, Salem Village, a 3-hour walk away, didn't have the same privilege. Hostile and jealous, Salem Village raised the price of necessities like food to the town. The colony struck misfortune again when a harsh winter resulted in wet grounds and poor wheat farming conditions. Some historians believe a form of bacteria called ergot, which happened to thrive in the current conditions of the soil, broke out amongst the rye farmlands. Ergot poisoning manifests itself through convulsive and gangrenous symptoms. The bacteria has even been linked with hallucinatory chemicals in LSD, causing mania, psychosis, and crawling sensations on the skin, and spasms, the very same symptoms described by young girls in Salem. Unluck seemed like a trend for the new European settlers, and an unfortunate combination of tragedies caused the idea of demonology to take a stronger hold in America than ever before.
In the quiet town of Salem, Massachusetts, tensions started to rise as unexplainable illness spread like wildfire from neighbor to neighbor. One of the first and most notable cases occurred in January of 1692, when cousins, Betty and Abigail Paris, began to suffer from convulsions and hallucinations. Sources recount them making nonsensical noises, contorting their bodies, and even throwing the Bible across the room. Reverend Samuel Paris, a prominent Puritan leader of Salem Village, was the father and uncle to the girls. Anxious for answers, he consulted a local doctor. Unable to provide any other explanation, the doctor diagnosed the girls as under an evil hand. When asked who their inflictors were, the girls provided 3 names. While these accused women came from diverse backgrounds, they all had one thing in common. They were outsiders. Sarah Good was a local beggar and single mother. Sarah Osborne was an elderly woman who hadn't attended church in over a year. Tituba was an enslaved household servant to the Paris family, who was either Caribbean, indigenous, or African. Ultimately, desperate for a scapegoat, the town turned to the obvious targets, the ones that were most vulnerable. Soon, symptoms reached Ann Putnam Jr. and Elizabeth Hubbard. Hubbard would accuse over 29 people during these trials, including Martha Corey and Rebecca Nurse, 2 respected church members. Historians suggest countless girls like Hubbard and Putnam saw the attention as a way to change the less than promising prospect of their future. By March, Osborne, Tituba, and Good are taken into questioning. What followed was an invasive and humiliating process, where the women were relentlessly tormented and even searched for moles birthmarks, or any other imperfections on their body, which were evidence that the devil had touched them. Eventually, the women confessed out of desperation, knowing it was their only choice if they wanted to live. Their testimonies would later be used as spectral evidence in court, which was evidence based on dreams and visions of the accuser. Anyone could invent entirely fake stories to imprison or kill the accused, without question. Spectral evidence would play an essential role throughout the trials held that year. Soon, paranoia creeps into the minds of neighbors. Men accuse their wives. Neighbors accuse their neighbors. Rich or poor, religious or not, women and men of all backgrounds were accused. Even Dorothy Good, the 4-year-old daughter of Sarah Good, is eventually accused and imprisoned. As for the first 3 accused, Osborne dies in May of 1692 in prison. Good is later hung in July. Tituba ends up surviving her sentence. For the next several months, hundreds of men, women, children, and even animals are accused of witchcraft. 20 men and women are hung, and Giles Corey, one of the executed men, is smashed to death under the weight of several boulders after refusing to obey the court and confess his crimes. The events of the Salem witch trials would lead to mass hysteria, resulting in 200 citizens of the community accused, tried, and 20 dead.
A new improved society may have not been instigated a day, week, or even a month after the Salem witch trials, but society slowly began to realize the way they were blinded by irrational fear. Governor Phipps officially ended the trials when his own wife was accused. This meant all accused witches would be released and the court of Oyer and Terminer would be dissolved. The General Court would eventually announce a day of fasting in remembrance for the victims of the trials in 1697, 4 years later. Even Samuel Sewell, one of the judges on the court of Oyer and Terminer, publicly confessed his guilt for the court's horrific actions. This made way for a new court, the Superior Court of Judicature, initiated by Governor William Phipps. The following August, the Salem Church released a statement expressing their remorse. Essentially, the town was trying to redeem all victims to their original status by paying their restitution, restoring their rights, and accepting them into the church. But no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't undo the permanent emotional damage they had caused. The Superior Court of Judicature disallowed the use of spectral evidence in the court of law, leading to the crucial turning point that still affects American courts today. Now, accusations must have witnesses or tangible evidence to prove someone's guilt. Established in late 1692, the court's stated purpose was impartial interpretation of laws and administration of justice. It later became the Supreme Judicial Court, and its Chief Justice, future President John Adams, wrote the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a model for America's Constitution. Centuries after the Salem witch trials, we also understand groundbreaking concepts like innocent until proven guilty and cross-examination. The trials became a watershed moment in the American justice system. The presumption of innocence is fundamental to due process, which was enshrined in the Fifth Amendment less than 100 years later. The powerless have the right to legal representation and can defend themselves in court through lawyers, reliable sources, and evidence. In addition to legal system concepts evolving, the courtrooms changed as well. During the trials, we could see how simple the courtrooms were. There was only an area for the accused and space for the court. Now we have areas for the accused, the accusers, witnesses, juries, judges, lawyers, and more. Following the Salem witch trials, the hysteria around the idea of witchcraft died down. People spoke up and started questioning the morals that society had revolved around for so long. Even dedicated Puritans and other Christians wondered if King James and other influential leaders' beliefs were true after they saw how far people were willing to go. Christians saw the Salem witch trials as an opportunity to spread their gospel further and to apologize for sin. The Salem witch trials represent what we are capable of and has inspired countless adaptations of witch hunts through movies, plays, and novels. From the AIDS pandemic to the Ghana witches, the idea of witch hunts and power abuse are still relevant.
300 years following the trials, we can testify to the way fear can ruin lives of innocent people and the importance of due process in protecting people against false accusations. The trials would lead to cross-examination, the state of innocent until proven guilty, and instituting the rights to legal representation in America. Maybe it was because of jealousy, or maybe conflict, but whatever the reason, the Salem witch trials permanently changed the way we perceived witches and the American court of law.